Hello and welcome to the fourth instalment of the Football Unravelled Podcast. We have another special guest today, but first of all, joining me as ever is a co-host, Brandon Faulkner. Brandon, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good. I'm glad to be back. I'm excited for today's guest.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And to introduce you to our guest, it's the performance analyst for Denmark under-21s. It's Thomas Sørensen. Thomas, how are you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. How are you getting on over there, first of all? Now with coronavirus, you're in a pretty good situation compared to us.
I think, yeah, maybe compared to some of the other European countries, we've opened up a little bit more, even for the football as well. So I think all stadiums are allowed to be, I think, a third of the capacity, maybe. So yeah, as I just told you, I went to a game yesterday, for example, with 4,000 spectators. I don't know if that's done anywhere in Europe, but so it's getting better slowly.
It's certainly better than over here.
Yeah, I can't wait for the day where I can actually go to a football stadium again. Hopefully soon, but we'll see. So yeah, just to sort of introduce yourself, Thomas. Really, just give us sort of a little bit of a background, I guess, on what it is you do. I know I sort of briefly introduced yourself, but if you'd just like to give the viewers a little introduction to yourself.
Yeah. So yeah, if anyone should be in doubt, I am from Denmark and I grew up in Denmark as well. I work for the Danish under-21 national team at the moment, which I've done for the past year and a half by now. Up until now, it was sort of a thing I did whilst university. Now I have more time, so now I've started doing more hours and will start full time soon. Working with the Danish under-21s and also helping the first team preparing for the upcoming Euros. Now that we have an extra year to prepare for that. For the Danish under-21s, I'm the only analyst, so I basically cover all of the three major aspects. What you can say is the pre-match, post-match, and mid-match analysis for the Danish under-21 national team. So that's where I'm at now.
So I think you're still obviously quite young, but you're at a very good spot for considering your age. But just sort of give us an idea of sort of your early experiences of football within Denmark. You know, sort of how old was you when you realised that you had the passion for football?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just to clarify, I'm 24 by now. So I, like so many other people, I played football when I was a kid. I was maybe actually a little bit late to start. And like so many other people as well, I stopped playing at 14, 15, becoming a part of that statistic. I then didn't really do anything with football for about a year. And then I started coaching when I was 16, which I did through my last school years and my high school years before eventually. And that was just in my local grassroots club. I did that. So eventually I grew an interest in especially the tactical side of football and these things. And in Denmark, it's quite normal to have a gap year between your high school and going to university, or at least one gap year. That gap year I spent helping out at Lyngby Boldklub, which is a club in the Danish Superliga, where I took on a role as an analyst. It wasn't a full-time role. It was mainly on match days. I worked gradually. It became more that I got involved. So that's how I sort of got into the professional game. And then since that, I've also helped out a little bit at a Danish club as well, FC Midtjylland. That was mainly around the European qualification campaign. I did that, and then spent the last 3 years at university doing various roles for various types of jobs for Lyngby, and then most recently the Danish national team as well.
Yeah, and I think as well that you've obviously not just been a performance analyst. You've got sort of your coaching experience as well. You're UEFA qualified. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just sort of a question to you for the analysts that are listening. How important would you say it is to sort of not almost mold yourself into just one role? How important do you feel it is to, be quite an open-minded person within football? With performance analysis, coaching, and so on.
Yeah, I think it's never a bad thing to know a lot about different things. But what we should remember though is that the analysts are specialists. They are not in the analysis part. They are not the sports psychologists, and shouldn't try to be either, because they're not qualified for that. But I think for me, where my background in coaching and my knowledge about coaching has helped me is that you understand how a coach thinks. You understand the vocabulary, not least. So you can communicate better with the head coach, and also you also then understand the processes of coaching, because I think some analysts or people who doesn't know that much about coaching, they might analyze one thing and they think this is wrong and tell the coach change it, and they expect it to be then it's changed. It's not like that, and you get an understanding of the difficulties of that job as well. Just like a coach who's been an analyst will know more about the analyst role and understand the processes of analysis better. So I think it just makes for, what can you say, smoother communication and better understanding for the people that you work with.
And I think as well that definitely from what we've spoke about before, if you've got that experience in coaching as well, you obviously can sort of see, I guess as well, it makes the communication better between the analyst and the coach. I mean, for you going through your various roles, how would you say that the communication from analyst to head coach or coach has been sort of received?
I think from the coaches that I've worked with recently, they've been quite happy with the way I can speak about football, because I use the expressions that are used at the coach education courses, especially when you come to a federation. I don't know that much about the English way, but in the Danish coach education, we have a lot of, what can you say, common words and expressions that we use, and of course those are dictated a little bit by the Danish FA. So people who work in the Danish FA will also use these words quite frequently. So just, especially in an FA, I think it's been a good advantage that I've been able to understand things quickly and communicate more efficiently.
And how is obviously, again, we've sort of spoke about it, but how would you say in Denmark the role of a performance analyst is sort of progressing? Because I guess that specifically in England, it's been quite a big thing now for the last decade. And I guess that maybe when you started at a good point when it was just sort of upcoming. So how would you say sort of the role is developing in Denmark?
I think to start, not all Danish Superliga clubs have dedicated analysts yet, so it's still something that's that's developing. I think for the Danish and for a classic Danish analyst in a Danish team, they are very video focused still. So the typical role will be somebody who process a lot of video, both own performances and opponent performances, and make sure that this video is available to players and coaches and manage their databases and things like that. I think a lot of them is used a lot like opponent scouts as well. So that's how the typical Danish performance analyst is. I think in terms of working with statistics and data, that is maybe a little bit newer in Denmark as well. So having a data scientist is not something that everybody has either. But recently, some deals has been made between third parties that delivers data for the Danish Superliga so they're quite beneficial for the league. So that's something that's definitely developing now as sort of the data availability in the league becomes better, because it's not always been very good. So I think it's still developing, and the data part is definitely starting to fill more and more. And I think a lot of clubs, they realize the benefits of somebody being able to process a lot of video as well.
Do you think that was like one of the main sort of wouldn't say, let's say selling points for when you sort of approached like your first club when you're trying to get into it? Do you think that was a way, it was an easy sell because you were sort of able to offer something that they didn't have at the minute?
So yeah, how I got my my first entry into professional football was I'd been coaching for what could that have been, something like 4 or 5 years, and then a club that already had an analyst were looking for somebody to help him out. And actually my main responsibility for the start was just to collect data and analyze that data. And that was very, very basic data, but there was a time where you had only got the data that you collected yourself. I don't think things like Opta data, for example, was not common in the Danish league back then, not as common as it is now. So that was how I got into it, because maybe our club started to realize that that was actually a thing that they needed. So I think that was, because that interest started at a club, then they needed more people to do it.
I think as well that data has just skyrocketed definitely the last decade. As you say, sort of Opta and companies like that as well. One of the things that I would sort of suggest is that whilst it has sort of skyrocketed in terms of sort of more advanced statistics and data, it requires as you said earlier, a specialist to sort of decipher that as well. It's not just the basic information of shots on target anymore. It's expected goals and stuff like that. So I guess that would you agree with the fact that you have to be sort of a specialist even more now than probably when you started before, Opta and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I think, and you still see this around, and at some clubs they tend to use and now I'm talking about Denmark, maybe Scandinavia more broadly as well, that they tend to use the maybe the under 19 coach or somebody with a coaching background as an analyst, maybe not somebody who has a university background or has a data science or sports science degree and these things. But I think they are definitely coming more in. They are definitely being more popular. These people with a specialist background in sports science or statistical degree. And I think when you look at most job postings these days as well, they also do require at least bachelor's degree in some sort of university field, which has not always been common. So I think definitely the analyst is being more and more specialized, whilst at the start it was mainly maybe a coach with some IT skills.
So I think as well, obviously, again, speaking to you, the Danish FA is making a big stride to implement a good analysis department, aren't they? I mean, I'm not really too familiar with other international countries' sort of analysis departments, but how big a thing is it now within the Danish FA, since obviously you've come in, and what they're trying to do now with the analysis department?
It's definitely growing at the moment. There are only still 2 dedicated analysts in the house full time, but we're looking to grow it further, definitely. I think now performance. I think a lot of the football federations, and I'm talking every football federation, not only the Danish, has a big advantage that they can work with universities around where they can also get student help for interns and these things, just like I was myself, because it's a quite good job to have, to even work with a youth national team, because it's not that many hours, because you don't play as many games. Of course, it's still many hours you have to put into it. But you're more flexible as an analyst for Danish or for a national team. So I think that's definitely an advantage that you can have as a football federation, that you can select people who are already in a university environment.
That's one of the things I was actually going to ask you, is how has it changed for you from going from sort of 1 or 2 games a week at club level to 1-2 games every sort of throughout the autumn a month, but then you have your break till March and then a break till June. How, I guess it's not any less work, but how is that sort of transition from being in such a hectic environment where you have to turn over every 1-2 days to probably having that a little bit more breathing space?
I think that is definitely an advantage of being a part of a football federation as well, is that, as you say, you have more time between games. Of course, you can. I think it's still difficult to prepare. I think it's definitely more difficult to predict a starting 11 at a national team level than it is on a club level, because you have less information about the opponent because they play less games, especially at an under 21 national team, because the players are not already known, and you might play some players that you cannot find a lot of information or even video about, so that can take some of your time as well. So you don't, for example, if you are an analyst for a Premier League club and you're going to play Liverpool, you know all of the Liverpool players and you know their capabilities, what they can, what they cannot do, and how they have done recently. Whilst that process of gathering that information is a little bit longer at a Danish under 21 level. But with that being said, of course, you have more time and you have more time to develop your workflows and develop the way that you analyze games, which is why I've had this. I think for me as a young analyst, it's been a very, very good thing to have, because you can really get the time to reflect over the things that you do and enhance your workflows and your processes. And because you have more time in between, at least for the analysis. Of course, there are other things within a federation that you spend time on, which you might not necessarily spend much time on at a club level.
And obviously, you're working within an elite environment currently, and I was just sort of wondering how much has actually changed from when you first walked through the door at Lyngby, and because again, performance analysis. I did my dissertation on this, and you can see that so much has sort of, again, I use the word skyrocketed, in terms of sort of software, data analytics and stuff like that. So when you first walked in the door at your first professional club to now, what's been sort of the biggest change that you've seen from what's available to you as a performance analyst?
Yeah, so when I joined Lyngby, you should remember that I wasn't the head of analysis. I was a guy working for an analyst. So I think back then I was mainly somebody who sort of worked with what I got sort of put in front of me. Whilst now with the Danish under 21s, and I'm the only analyst, then you need to be more proactive in terms of finding out what software you can work with and finding out how you can work with it. For example, for the Danish under 21s or for the under 21 European qualifiers, there are not a very great amount of data available always, and I think that's mainly due to the various locations that you play your matches in. So you need to be. So what? Since I walked in since I walked in the door at Lyngby, to answer your question, of course I've broadened my knowledge about analysis. I've learned to see things a different way by talking to people, by connecting with people. But I've also definitely enhanced my skills within not only industry software like Sports Code, for example, which I think is one of the more popular ones. But since I started being the only analyst for the under 21s, I've also been, what can you say, forced to expand to more statistical programming skills like R, for example, which is something that's made for statistics, in order to sort of get the most out of the data that we have with the under 21s. So yeah, I think that's definitely a big difference that I've learned to work with more software, and that I've got to know people who can tell me more about the game and see things from different angles.
Yeah, so like as you said, you've got to speak to a lot of different people, made a lot of connections over the years. So how did, well, you said obviously through university was getting into the first one at Lyngby. But how did you manage to go from there to at such an elite level at the Danish under-21s in sort of short space of time?
I think for me, as one of the in a country like Denmark, as we already discussed, there are not that many performance analysts yet, especially not with a background in a sports-related degree, because they are not as frequent in Denmark as they are in England, which is also why I had to go to England to do it. So I think that's definitely opened some doors for me to go to the university, and then I had a network from back when I was at Lyngby, which helped me get into the federation.
I think so you leave Lyngby, and then I think it sort of what I've got jotted down on my piece of paper is it's almost like a logical step, almost like a progression to go to a club like Midtjylland, one that's in its own right probably very ambitious. How did your responsibilities change from Lyngby to Midtjylland?
It's just to be clear, I didn't do that much work around FC Midtjylland. It was mainly very specific. I didn't do much close to the players or the coaching staff. It was a lot about it was mainly very specific tasks of processing some data, and I also scouted some matches for their European qualifications when they were trying to qualify for the Europa League, which we missed out on. I think a club like Midtjylland was the times that I spent in the club. I wasn't there every day. It's located in the other end of the country, but the time I spent in the club there, I definitely met some new people who are also some of them that I work with now at the Danish FA as well. But a club like Midtjylland is obviously for a Danish standard at least quite unique in the way that they work with data and the way that they work with what can you say, they are not very traditional compared to Danish club either for their academy either, and it's quite an open environment in their club as well. So go and learn from who were to be Danish champions later that season as well was definitely an experience.
They did have very specific tasks for you, and I remember you telling me that you had to mark the near post at corners in training. I think now I said that, people would probably want to know the story behind that. So no,
that's a big embarrassment.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Let's just say you didn't come out of it very well, did you? When you went up against a 6'6" striker or whatever. No. Okay, we'll leave that one. No worries. I did sort of note down your coaching experience. Obviously, we know each other from university, and you was obviously the head coach of the university team in the Bucks League. I just sort of, coming to England and then coaching. How was that for sort of, almost teaching you something different compared to what you was sort of learning in Denmark? And what I mean by that is probably, coaching adults as well, because obviously you said that you was a teacher in Denmark as well, a supply teacher with kids. So, just sort of give us a little bit of a background as to your coaching experience within sort of the Bucks team.
Yeah. So I think for a team like a Bucks team, and at that level at least, you don't get to train with the full squad that often. So I think for me, what it taught me was sort of to put what you had on the field and then be very, very quick during the game to analyze what was happening and what you could impact on the day, instead of trying to prepare a lot towards the game, because that would usually never end the way that you would expect it to, because it was very, very difficult to really implement any patterns or any principles. So I think for that, it was the experience. My main takeaways from that was to analyze the game as it was going on and acting during the game.
I think as well, though, that's probably a lesson in sort of efficiency as well, which I guess you can sort of transfer over to analysis. I guess you have to be sort of efficient in what you want to put across to definitely the coaching staff. So I guess that in some ways that's probably a skill that you might have picked up as well along the way.
Yeah, because I have to do the same. I mean, during the games with under 21s, I also have to analyze as the game is going on. So I think being and I have even less time there. So when I analyze a game now during the game, I have maybe 1 minute, 1.5 minutes at maximum with the coach to give my piece of my opinions on the game and my piece of advice for him. When I was coaching myself, I had all the time to say whatever I wanted and these things. So yeah, definitely there's something around the efficiency.
Okay, and obviously, Thomas, you left Denmark to come to England to study. Obviously, that's how we all know each other. First of all, I've actually got noted down here that you actually did a degree in Denmark, didn't you? It wasn't in football, though, was it?
Not a university degree, but in Denmark we do. In high school, you pick a sort of smaller degree, if I can translate it to English. Yeah, I did that in music.
It's just a man of all trade, don't you? Really, you got to get your players in tune, haven't you? When you so it makes sense. It makes sense. No, in all seriousness, though, you left Denmark to come to England for football studies at Solent University. Just why, really? I guess you in your own right, you was doing quite well in Denmark. So yeah. Just
no, but definitely I could have stayed and I might have got a full-time job. I might have ended up regretting it, but now I did it anyway. Yeah, to be honest, I sort of could see where things were heading in regards to requirements for analysts in academic experience. So I thought, okay, I do this now. I postpone my career for 3 years. But okay, if I was at home, I took a job part-time maybe, and then eventually if that wouldn't work out or if for whatever reason I should be without a job for the year after, then all of a sudden I had wasted that opportunity and these things. So I thought it was probably a now or never situation if I wanted to do it. So that's why I did it. And then also, of course, just to come over and have the experience, study football, study with like-minded people, if you will, people who are also interested in football, which is always something you can learn from to discuss with people.
And I think as well that it's within football, it's all about sort of anticipation, isn't it? As well, I guess that as you said, as we discussed before, performance analysis is becoming such a specialized topic or specialized field, I should say. So it's about that anticipation in knowing what you have to do to, for 5-10 years time, if you want to look for a role, and then potentially a university degree will be a must.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you have 10 years of working in football, people don't care if you have a university degree or not. That's what that's what I would think at least. But yeah, for a young, if you have the opportunity as a young person to go and do a degree in something, I should think it's worth considering, given where the requirements for the analyst is moving these days.
Yeah. So yeah, just moving on from that. Obviously, when you was in your final year of your degree, you got the role with the Danish FA for the under-21s. Yeah. In that last year, just obviously with all the international windows and stuff like that in term time, how was it juggling the two, a full-time degree and then obviously taking the role with the under-21s?
It wasn't that difficult. I think if you manage your time, you can do it. Of course, there was an understanding from the federation side that I was a university student, which of course helped. But the university were also supportive in change and wanted to listen if I wanted to change assessment days and these things. So I think with the help of both the university and the Football Federation, it was manageable. And then it was just good to, because this was my first role where I was the leading analyst, so it was good to come out and try myself to sort of build my own, have my own sandbox, if you could say like that. All the things that I'd spent, all the time that I spent learning about these things, both from people back in Denmark and sort of the opinions that I formed from that, and then my academic experience and trying to learn how to put those into practice. There was also an academic learning in being, even though I was practicing on the field. So I think it made me a better student, and being a student made me a better analyst. So
it sort of went intertwined with each other, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you go, obviously. What is sort of your responsibilities? You touched on it a bit earlier. You know, you're the pre, post, and sort of within the middle of the match as well. So sort of, you know, what is your responsibilities at this moment?
So yeah, I first of all, I help keeping track on the Danish players, the ones that we could potentially select for our next squad. I keep track of them, how much game time they have, keep up to date with some KPIs, watch the games if I have the opportunity to do so, and then give my opinion on the team selection. And then I'll have a big responsibility in the opponent analysis. So also I might do a similar thing for the opponent players. So if we're playing Ukraine, which is our next game, then also keep track of their players and who they might select for the team. So we have a better start there. And then obviously, as everybody would do, they watch the last games and they analyze the games via some KPIs that you have determined in your staff is important to you. And then of course there's the post match. Then during the match I will also come down in halftime, help with the analysis, give my opinion on that. And post match, of course, after the first, you usually have 2 games in a national team week. So after the first game is usually very pressured because there'll always be a travel day afterwards. So for example, when we played Ukraine in November, we had to take 3 planes the day afterwards and have a training session. So you don't have a lot of time for analysis the day after. So sort of doing that as good as I can, and then having the weeks after that, or just the days after, because then you start preparing for the next games, and then having the days after to give some good, more in-depth feedback for the coaches.
One of the things I was going to ask as well is training analysis. Is that something that you do as well?
Yes, I think for tactical training we use it quite often, because when you play with a national team, you don't get
that much.
So you don't have a lot of good examples of the way you want to play and these things. And I think training provides a possibility to really structure your examples and be very clear, and then use that footage as well for the players. So if you have a certain way you want to press and you train that, then you can also analyze that, having the best examples to show the players, instead of going through a lot of game clips where you maybe do it halfway, but you have only played 3 games and they haven't maybe even learned it properly yet. So I think that's where we use training analysis the most in terms of tactical training.
I guess.
So we're obviously doing it with the training ones. Do the players all take your advice well, or do some sort of maybe have sort of an attitude where they're not quite as accepting of analysis and are more sort of about the feel of the game?
I think it's different. I've never experienced anything myself where anybody didn't want to take advice. I think that's not something that I've experienced. But obviously, the players learn different ways, and some have to be approached differently. Some want answers straight away. Some want to discuss things. Some just want to have the information and leave. So that's the sort of what you, as an analyst, if you're the one delivering, you have to have that feeling of who wants to do it which way. So yeah, that's some of the human skills that it requires to be an analyst, I think.
I think as well, from you saying that, it's about knowing the individual, and I think that definitely, as someone that's done analysis and coaching, I think that is something that coaching really helps with as well. When you go into analysis, obviously you're managing your players, and you need to know who takes this like that, or who prefers it this way to the other guy.
So my first game with the Danish under-21s team was in March last year. We're playing Belgium and France in 2 matches, and I'd only just signed before going away on that camp. So I had a meeting. We're meeting on the Monday, and on the Friday I had a meeting with the then head coach Niels. And so we had a meeting. We discussed how we're going to do things, and he asked me, because it was the first time I met Niels just before we left them, and he asked me, can you find some clips on some of the key players for Belgium? And I say, okay, I find the clips, and then during the weekend I found the clips, and I showed him on the Monday when we met, and he then tells the assistant coach, I think these are very good clips, and he says to the assistant coach, I think you should go and show them to the players, and we say, I just said, oh, okay, I'll bring the laptop once that is, because I just thought I'll bring the laptop, and the assistant then explains it, because I was very new and these things, and I walk into the room, and the assistant says, okay, now Thomas will show you some clips and present them to you, which obviously caught me a little bit off guard on my first day. So I show the clips. I speak well through the clips and these things, and then one of the players then asked me, because we spoke about a certain winger and a lot of what he could do going inside and outside and these things, and a player then asks me, so what do we do to close him down? And I was on my first day, I was maybe a little bit careful of starting to give instructions, because I wasn't too sure how they usually did things. So because I didn't really have the answer just at that spot, I just asked him, so what would you want to do? So that sort of started a discussion with the players, and we could start, because it was in a unit group, so it wasn't all of the 20 players. I think it was 5 players who could potentially play against this guy. So that then started a discussion where the guy who asked the question is obviously a guy who he just wants me to tell him what he has to do, while some of the other players, then they would go in and engage in a discussion and start to talk about we could do it like this, we could do it like that, and these things, and the assistant coach gets involved as well and comes with his opinion. We start having these discussions, and that was a delivery format that some of the players really liked, and I remember we used that format during the Euros and in the summer as well, and we before playing one of the games, we had the same type of meeting where we said, but then we already said to the players that we're just going to discuss the clips after, and then actually the same player who asked me the question, so what do we do about him, turns around to his teammate and says, yeah, you take him when he goes inside, I take him when he goes outside, because that was sort of the format that were proposed to players, and the format that player bought into now. So I think that it can be delivered different ways, as long as you're maybe also clear to the players what type of delivery it is that they're going to receive now.
I think yeah, it's quite interesting you saying that, but sort of moving on, I guess. You mentioned the Euros. That you went away with the under-21s to the Euros last summer, wasn't it? It was last summer, yeah. Just tell us a bit about your experience, really, of being, tournament football, where I guess that under-21s you still think development, but I guess in a competition environment, the winning is very obviously very important. Goes without saying.
So in the under-21 Euros last year, it's going to be different in the next upcoming one. There are 3 groups, and the 3 group winners are going through, and then the best second placed are all through to the semifinals. So we played in a group with Germany, Austria, and Serbia, and we played Germany in the first one. And if the first place only goes through, the pressure is on you from the first game. There's no catching up in the 2 second games. And also it should also be mentioned that in the under 21 Euros you have one less day between the games than in a men's World Cup. So you only have 2 free days between the games. So it's actually a very compressed week tournament, the group stages. So I think the time pressure, of course, is very, very big, especially if you're the only analyst like I was. So for example, after the Germany game, we would both have to analyze the game we just played against Germany, and then just as soon as we had delivered that analysis in the morning, we would have to start analyzing the game that Austria had played Serbia on the same evening, in order to fit that analysis into the preparation we'd already done for the game against Austria, which would be the next one, in order to being able to deliver that analysis in the evening. So it's 2 quite big analysis meetings, quite important analysis meetings that'll have to be ready on within the same day. So I think that the time pressure during a tournament is very big, and you need, if you're well prepared, of course, it becomes less, but you really have to prepare well. And when you play in a group where only one winner goes through, and you play in a group with Germany, of course the pressure is big from the start.
Yeah, and I think as well that I think the under 21s, from sort of looking at some of the players, are quite talented as well. So it's just sort of, I think, because you got to the semi-finals, didn't you?
No,
is that right?
We came second in the group, but we weren't the best second.
Right, that's poor on my part. That's a fine. Not researching that. But yeah, just the experience as a whole, though. How much do you think it helped you as an analyst within such an elite environment where the turnover times are really short?
But it teaches you so much, because you have to be. So I think a lot of people are very capable of analyzing a football game. When I see somebody posting things on the internet or whatever, of course there's a lot of things you have to be very critical about. But I read a lot of good people analyzing games. I listen to my friends, they can analyze games. But I think what makes the difference between somebody who's good at analyzing a game and somebody who's a good analyst is somebody who can do it under pressure, and then very, very precise in how you want to analyze the game and what is important to you. What information does the coach want? That is where you become a good analyst. If you can do that under pressure and and the information that you give is applicable to the coach. So you can speak a lot about crosses and about creating triangles or whatever expression we can just say about football. But if that is not important for a game, but if the coach, if that's not something that he cares about, then you've wasted a lot of time, which is very valuable in a very time pressured tournament.
Yeah. It goes back to that sort of idea of efficiency as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously you've had that experience. So I just want to sort of touch on sort of the future for Danish football, and sort of as an outsider looking in, I think Denmark as a footballing country has always had a strongish team, I would say. It's always obviously Danes love their football, but where do you see the future for Danish football? Because you look at the senior squad right now, and I think you have a lot of good players in there. So I think we spoke about this before as well, that it's the future's quite bright for Danish football, and especially with the strides that the Danish FA are making to really try and get to the next level.
Yeah. I mean, I can only speak for Denmark. If they are good in comparison to Poland, to Ukraine, or whatever is coming forward at the moment, then I don't know. But I think we're in a good place at the moment. So the game I spoke about yesterday, which I went to watch FC Midtjylland against FC Copenhagen yesterday, where Midtjylland, that is number one against number two, and Midtjylland could become Danish champions by winning. So it's a big game, of course. And we had 6 Danish under 20 or potential under 21 players on the pitch in such a big game. 2 of them scored in the game as well. I think that in itself, that speaks for itself, that I think in Denmark we have started to become more, what can I say, we play more young players, we give them more young minutes, even in a big game like this, that 2 of the best teams that could easily go out and buy players compared to the other team, that they still want to play their young players. And I think that's a good thing. We also have the youngest team in the whole Europe playing in the Danish Superliga. FC Nordsjælland is currently the youngest squad in Europe and has been for a few years now, I think, which is good to see that all of our Danish Superliga clubs plays their young players in the league, that they want to give them the chance. And I think also out of the last 4 European Cups for the under 21s, Denmark has qualified for 3 of them. At the moment, we have maximum points in the qualifying fire for the next one. So hopefully that will be the 4th in a row coming up now, which I think it's good. Is for the past 10 years, the under 21s has been constantly among the 8, or more or less constantly among the 8 best in Europe. Our under 17s and under 19s have qualified for the elite rounds recently, both the European elite rounds. So on youth level, result-wise, I think we are doing good, result-wise at least, in terms of minutes played and results for the national teams.
I think as well, we're talking about Danish football and specifically the national team. I think countries in sort of Scandinavia get stereotyped into sort of the philosophy of playing one way. But I think as well, you look at the Denmark team and there's a lot of flair players in there. And I was just wondering where, you take these sort of young Danish players coming through, would you sort of say that they're coming through and the system is making them more of a technical flair player as opposed to maybe what it was sort of 20 years ago maybe, or fit into that stereotype of being very physical?
I mean, Scandinavian football has been influenced by British football in many years in the whole of Scandinavia, and I think that's still visible in some of the players that we develop. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because I don't think that, for me, a Danish player doesn't have a stereotype. I think that we have different types of players at the moment, and I think when I am by far from being the best one to discuss this subject of Danish talent development. There are people in the federation who knows much more about this than me, but I think that when I speak to my friends who are youth coaches in the leagues, that they seem to have quite a technical emphasis. But I think that where we're going now, a lot of the coaches have also started thinking about the sort of the tactical intelligence and the game intelligence for the players and how we can develop that. And I think that from my perspective, that's really good to see that we have started taking into consideration that how the players think about football should also be a part of player education.
And just sort of linking onto that, I guess, the extra year for Denmark, obviously Euro 2021, a lot of people in England feel it's going to be more beneficial to have that extra year because obviously we've got the likes of Sancho or improve more, Foden and stuff like that, Greenwood, players like that, I should say. As a nation, how do you think that would benefit Denmark for it to be pushed back a year?
I think I'm the wrong one to ask about that. That's up to the national team coach to decide what players and what benefits that have.
Very diplomatic answer. So yeah, I think we'll just probably finish it by sort of touching on networking and how important it is for young people within football to get sort of connected to like-minded people, but people that probably have more experiences within the game.
Yeah.
Sort of how would you rank that as in terms of importance? Because it sort of sometimes goes back to the sort of saying that it's not as such what you know, it's who you know. How would you sort of assess how important networking is for anyone, sort of any young person within football?
I think it cannot be underestimated. A good network. It's also how I've gotten about to get my opportunities. But getting a network, of course, also you get it by having some skills that you also are able to display. And I think for a young analyst, my best advice is to be very proactive and take a chance when you have it. So, for example, when I first started at Lyngby, as I told you, I was only supposed to be there on match days for a start. But what I thought back then was that now I have my foot inside the door. Lyngby is quite an open club. There's not that much staff, so I had direct access to the assistant coach and head coach and these things. So I think, so what I did was that I decided to be a little bit more proactive about it instead of just turning up and doing what I was told to do. Then I started to create some match reports myself and sort of collect data, which was actually very basic. It was things like shot maps, for example, which at that point weren't common in the Danish league, and started showing that to the analyst and the head of analysis, the assistant coach and the head coach, and they then started liking it. They thought, but he sort of, that's the way you gain their trust, and that then you can get to spend more time with them on the bus, and they remember you and these things. So I think just once you're there, don't be happy that you're there. You have to go and be proactive about it. So I think that would be my best advice to anyone.
Lovely. Brandon, anything from you?
No, I was going to ask a question on that, but you pretty much just followed right through and answered it while you're talking about that. So
yes, I think we'll leave it there then. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been a real great insight into your experiences so far, and I'm sure all the analysts that will listen to this will be appreciative of the advice that you've given. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
yeah, thank you very much, Thomas.